Return of the Exiled, or Why Must I Be the Hero? By T.J. Stegaheis. Read by Yob. Dedicated to Kurt Reimert, whose stories inspired this work. Requiescat in pace. Chapter 22. A Royal Homecoming. Prince Nicholas and his father spent 4 days at the pass. During this time, Prince Frederick briefed his son on what the city of Tai had been like when he lived there. People from nearby towns and villages came to the camp to discover who had come to their aid. Among those old enough to recognize Prince Frederick after all these years, amazement and joy abounded. Among those who were too young to recognize their prince, the presence of a mighty army did much to convince them of Prince Frederick's legitimacy as well as that of his son. The presence of General Randon was harder to justify to the people. Many still believed the tales told by King Napier and King Henry. Arundel was also there, causing many eyebrows to rise and flutter as people tried to comprehend the magnitude of the changes that were happening. Despite all of the doubts, not many would argue with an army of over 30,000 soldiers in the shadow of the destroyed pass. Those who would not accept their heir apparent to the throne of Tor were quietly invited to leave. Most, on recalling how much the land of Tor had fallen into chaos and ruin, decided to back this new claimant, General Randon included, as being their best hope to fill the void of Tor's vanished leadership. In the end, they held an enthusiastic celebration for the return of their prince and hopefully their good fortunes. Then, on the 5th day, they broke camp and set forth. The princes, the Spovens, and their allies moved on Tai, the old capital of their old home, which they would transform into the capital of their new kingdom. It was a long journey, traversing the whole length of Tor. Highwaymen do not rob armies, so they met with no adventures along the way, although news of their coming must surely have preceded them. Some delays were inevitable: the rebuilding of the bridges over Dale Creek and the River Riz, the helping of villagers and farmers where the cataclysm had left houses and barns damaged and fields strewn with debris. Also the occasional wild celebration by people who recognized Prince Frederick and expected good fortune to fall in his wake. A few more stray nobles showed up with such men as they had and joined them to show their acceptance and support of the princes. "Better to join an army than oppose one," said Lord Corran with a wry grin. Weeks later, the princes reached the city of Tai. Smoke was able to gain intelligence from the local thieves' guild. From what they reported, it did not look like an easy victory. The garrison at Tai was still intact and full of Falcon Legion troops. More so, since those soldiers driven out of Teuton and Sersha had come here to report. The town was fortified. The populace was warned not to accept these pretenders and thieves. They flew the flag of King Henry's Tor. The princes waited a whole month outside the city walls. They flew the ancient flag of King Leopold's Tor. They did not attack, they just waited. Unfortunately for the Falcon Legion, they had spun tales to the populace too many times. This time their chief storyteller was not there to advise them, having been in Riston when it fell. The people did obey their commanders at first, but in the besieged city of Tai, tempers frayed. Patience grew shorter and shorter. Contradictory orders were given and recalled, only to be given again by other officers. Ships stopped coming to the docks in response to a blockade by the Circean navy. King Buford may have had no soldiers to send, but he had many ships, and he kept Tai closed. Officers of the Tauran navy came to parley with the princes and agreed to stand off until all was resolved. Discipline in Tai began to break down. Soldiers abused the populace, and the citizens abused them back. Just before the town would have erupted into open violence, somebody opened the gate. Frustrated, and exhausted, none of the soldiers resisted or fought. The incoming army and royalty, perhaps sensing none of the soldiers resisted or fought the incoming army of royalty and soldiery, perhaps sensing the futility of such an engagement. All quietly waited and watched as the princes of Old Tor rode into Tai and took command of the palace. The old palace was deserted. What command officers were left stood with their men. Prince Nicholas had won his capital city without a fight. They began the reconstruction of the old royal palace, which had been used as a military garrison for the past 30 years. General Randon showed Windy his old office as paymaster so many years ago. It had been converted into the quartermaster's office and study. Windy tried to envision it as he described it. "I wonder," he mussed her uncle, and examined a wall. With the butt of his dagger he knocked away a plaster patch and found what he wanted. On one of the exposed stones he tapped a bit with his dagger, then grasped it with his fingers. The stone proved to be a tiny drawer, and from it he drew a small pouch. "Ah, it is still here," he pronounced with some enthusiasm. "Look!" And he pulled out a ring that was a larger version of the one Wendy wore. Up close she could see that this ring had stones of blue instead of the pearls on her ring. The ring was tarnished and obviously had not been cared for in a long time. "After the 7th and 8th rings were struck and recognized," said Randon. "But before the murder, I was meant to become Lord Spovin when the time came. My father gave me this ring as a sign of my place as his heir. Then all was lost, and I thought little of the ring I had left here. This, Windy, is the 5th ring of the House Spovin. It is in my keeping now as my brothers Gerald and Nathaniel are gone." It had not occurred to Windy that her uncle, being the elder, was rightfully the Lord Spovin. Now what would happen? But Uncle Randon assured her that his duties elsewhere would preclude his taking the title. "Besides," he said, "I have no heirs, so it would pass ultimately to your brother in any event. Let the 7th ring, hopefully still in your father's keeping, continue to be the Lord's ring." "If you have the 5th ring, and father and I have the 7th and 8th rings, who has the 6th ring?" queried Windy. "And what of earlier rings?" "My Aunt Annette had been the 6th ring's keeper, but we lost contact with her after the murder. I believe that your second cousin Cerise is the ring's keeper now, although her fate is a mystery. All the earlier rings were buried with their keepers." "More uncles, and a second cousin. Family members I never knew," thought Windy. "I have much to rediscover." The royal apartments had been sealed off. When opened, they proved to be just as they had been left so long ago. A few valuable decorations had been removed, but otherwise all was still as it was. Prince Frederick wandered through the rooms in a half-daze, remembering his father. Prince Nicholas followed him, trying to envision how it had been. He looked at paintings of his grandfather and grandmother with awe. The family resemblance was there. King Leopold was a taller, more muscular version of Prince Frederick. Prince Nicholas reflected that he had his grandmother's eyes and his grandfather's jawline, but his slender frame was from his Lusinian mother's family. They went through a secret panel into King Leopold's old office. There, in dusty cabinets, they found the family records, still intact. Prince Frederick showed his son their genealogy and how their family was related to other royal and noble families. The king-to-be absorbed all of this with interest. King Thurill returned from the campaign against the goblins. He was soon followed by King Roloff, King Heeson IV, and Lord Thorindil. Prince Darindil came into the city late in the day, accompanied by King Valan and his army. Princesses Karen and Kia, the wives of Princes Frederick and Nicholas, arrived in their company. King Thurill kept chuckling at dinner as he explained, "We bore down on the border between the swamp and border between the swamp goblins and Bokenshire, fully expecting to have to run down and round up the goblins and face a strong defense by the ogres. Instead, we found His Majesty King Valon's General Telemann leading a charge against the ogres as the goblins were already in retreat. We joined our men to his charge just as they broke over a low rise, and the ogres fairly bolted for the swamp. We caught up with one of their leaders, and he gibbered something about magically multiplying armies. He thought that we had somehow magically increased King Balan's army in the act of charging. As you can imagine, we made no effort to reveal the true nature of the magic. Windy marveled at how King Thuriel, so somber and official in his court, was mirthful and witty when in the field. Indeed, all the royals seemed to be more personable and relaxed away from their respective courts. They in no way hesitated to agree to our demands, and remain in the marshlands and fens of the great swamps, where they can harm none, said King Roloff. A treaty will be signed forthwith to reinforce A treaty will be signed forthwith to enforce their acceptance of the terms. Had they overrun Bokenshire, they next would have threatened said King Valon. We could not allow that, so we placed our army where we thought it would be of best value. The chances of any goblin getting past the stone-hammered dwarves' kingdom was too small to be of any worry. King Valon was being modest in his support of King Roland. The kings related that a ship carrying the two princesses had landed in Greatport just as all had been settled with the ogres, and the armies were preparing to return to Tai. It was thought to be most practical that the princesses and their bodyguards travel with King Valon and Prince Darandil for protection. The two princesses proved to be both likable and sensible. Although they were much older than herself, Lady Spovin found herself in laughing, chatting, girlish company such as she had missed since leaving home. In the days leading up to the coronation, Lady Spovin grew more adept at royal and noble society, while the royals and nobles enjoyed inflating her reputation. The presence of many elves and dwarves in Tai was a source of immense wonder and gossip, the people having often accounted these races as myth or a people so remote as to be of no concern. Much adjustment and learning took place. A few nights later, King Teek showed up to help celebrate the coronation of Tor's new king and get away from the court at Gorville City. Lady Spovin, His Highness and Her Highness enthused as they arrived and unceremoniously hugged her before she had risen from her curtsy. How wonderful to see you here! Yes, Gina was right. Like it or not, Wendy was Lady Spovin. King Teek officially delivered King Mathrin's apologies for not attending the coronation, then managed to disappear until just before the coronation ceremony. King Darodane of the Blue Forge Dwarves arrived with King Teek and offered formal greetings to the other kings and princes. He was a sour and officious old dwarf, and Wendy found no way to warm up to him. The elves Tharandil and Arundil's father, Farandil, held a private ceremony to return Arundil to his membership in the Green Forest Elven community. Thus they could attend the coronation ceremony together, representing the elves officially as a family. Tharandil was in fact Arundil's uncle. Wendy was allowed to attend the restoration ceremony as a friend of the elves. Farandil commented on how civilized she was, and Arundel was forced to sit down as he was faint from shock. The head falcon keeper for the Falcon Legion was in a rage. Someone had stolen a set of nesting boxes from the local henhouse and placed it in the falconry. The falcon keepers were not amused. Cilio and Filio professed innocence of the deed, and the gnomish fighters had remained with the Thanatian archers at Roltasapan. Later, the quartermaster for the Falcon Legion reported that someone had scattered chicken feathers around the temporary barracks, further adding to the hostility. It took 4 months to get the palace in good enough condition to host the coronation of King Nicholas I. King Geoffrey of Teuton arrived just in time for the ceremony and told him that he must leave on the morrow. "A band of Falcon Legion holdouts is making us work for our peace," he explained. General Halford would be going back as well to help enforce the king's will. Along with King Geoffrey came Lord Donald and Lady Ariel of Teuton, who would be staying on as Teuton's ambassador to Tor. This was especially exciting for Wendy, as Lady Ariel was her great-aunt Ariel, whom her uncle had mentioned. They got a little chance to meet each other before the coronation, but promised each other that they would find time to talk. Wendy suspected that her uncle had much to do with Lord Donald's selection as an ambassador. Lord Michael, Duke of Mercia, also came about then. He sought out Wendy to apologize for his briskness on their first meeting, and said that he hoped that the Lady Spovin would not take it personally. He spoke to her warmly and with such elegant and refined language that she was afraid to reply lest she break the spell. He parted with an invitation for Lady Spovin to come to Mercia again for a more social occasion. Only then did Wendy realize that he had been the man in fancy silks that she had briefly seen in the magistrate's court in Pan. The Reverend High Priest of the local Church of the One True God presided over the coronation. A major change from tradition was the inclusion of the displaced Reverend Mother of Riston Temple and her priestesses in the proceedings. Sabrina was amazed to be presented with a document officially transferring her to the Corpon House of Healing. The Reverend Mother blessed her and wished her well in her new life. A local painter had rendered a fair image of Bud and Riff in heroic poses as they fought off hordes of goblins. The legend said that they defended Lady Spovin and the evidence that she carried, so that Prince Frederick and Prince Nicholas might come to Tor's aid. They were now heroes, although few would visit their faraway graves. They would be remembered and honored in other ways. The local minstrels sang songs they had hurriedly put together. "For Prince Frederick was forced to flee, from devious enemies beyond went he. But time did come when Tor was in need, our princes returned on a mighty steed. Heroes behind and a son at his side, back from the shadows where they did abide. He drove back our foes through the mountain ways, to ice and snow where they shall remain. King Nicholas reigns as Tor's mighty liege, a hero for all of us who believe. To Shadowlands returned Frederick, for he would return again if Tor was in need. Our Lady Spovin, she took to the field. The raging snow giants they refused to yield. The lady did call men to her command. She had but to raise one dainty hand. Thousands of men they formed at her back. The Grolls at Gourd Crossing cried out, Alack! The giants stood, for they would not be cowed. The giants felled them, in the fields they were plowed. Up to the high pass with the princes and kings, for all foes of Tor, the death angel sings. The wise Tenard met the forces of the land, met the foes of the land. A mighty wand he did hold in his hand. The Grolls did flee to the mountains' reach. The giants in fear did his mercy beseech. He blocked their return to the peaceful land, closed the pass with a wave of his hand. When the mighty Tenard now meets his foes, he waves his wand and they become toads. Upon the fields went the hero Sard. He drove his foes, he drove them hard. Death and disgrace await for those who stay. A wise foe knows he must flee far away. For goblin, Groll, and giants so tall, the hero Sard, he defeated them all. And even the Baron Gelfer was an evil man. He followed heroes across the land. He wanted the book, he found the book, he followed it into the fire. He spoke with hate, he earned his fate, a victim of his own desire. The Baron Gelfer was an evil man. His ashes now rest in the scattered sand. Later, as the noisy and enthusiastic celebration was going on, Wendy found a quiet corner to collect her thoughts. As she sat, a cleaning woman, now finished with the royal apartments, was heading for the servants' door when she stopped and stared at Wendy. "I beg your forgiveness, my lady, but you bear a strong likeness to a young wench I was locked up with many moons back. I could not help but note the resemblance," she said. Wendy looked harder at the woman and realized that she was the woman named Sheila who had helped her repair her clothes in the dungeon. "Why, it is you! How did you ever get out of that dungeon?" said Wendy. "I never saw you leave." "Oh, that was easy as eating pie," said the woman. "Nothing is as common or as overlooked as the washerwomen in a castle or a fortress. We simply picked up some rags and started cleaning our way out. When the captain saw us, we asked him, 'Do you want your office cleaned?' He says he, 'Get out of here! Can you not see that I am busy? There has been an escape!' So we left, just like that." "An escape," repeated Wendy, savoring the irony. "An escape," repeated Wendy. Both women had a good laugh. Sheila looked at the lightning scars on Wendy's arm and asked, "What's it like being a hero?" "Confusing," said Wendy. "I know that they all call me a hero, but I don't know how it came to pass. You saw me in that dungeon, how I really was. Did I look like a hero to you?" "Well, no," admitted Sheila. "You looked like a girl who had just been used and left hurt and frightened. But look at what they say you have done. How are you not a hero?" "I just did what I had to do and survived," said Wendy. "If that is a hero, very well then. But it is still very confusing." "I guess that will have to do then," said Sheila. Then Wendy thanked her and bid Sheila blessings and good night before returning to the feasting hall. Her Uncle Randon had a gift for her, a silver comb for her once again long red hair. "Oh, thank you, dear uncle," said Wendy with enthusiasm. "I guess that I will be dressing for celebrations now more than for battle." Then she received a pleasure few might even hope for. 8 mighty kings gathered around her and sang an old song of birthday well-wishing. "A birthday celebration today for you, a great good fortune in all that you do, for long life, happiness, and wealth too. May your life be filled with glory, and all of our love to you." King Heeson was not in time with the others. King Darodane was mouthing the words. King Teek was enthusiastically off key, and Winnie did not know whether to smile, giggle, clap, or cry. She wound up doing all of these together. Her uncle smiled, a beaming, unrestrained smile. Something shone in the corners of his eyes. Today, Wendy turned 18.